moments occur. For example, funeral planning. One of the things we'll be discussing tonight, and Rosemary will walk, or I don't know how much of a walkthrough you're going to do, but she's got her whole presentation in what she's going to say. But those are really great conversations to have now, as opposed to the moment when somebody's just lost a loved one. Emotions are very, very raw, and a lot of times we just get panicked and trying to make those arrangements. And so to give some thought into that, a lot of medical questions, especially with, unfortunately, even some of our Catholic hospitals don't always observe all the Catholic ethical directives that we would hope they would, to know what they are and to be insistent upon that in advance. And so that's what we're talking about as well. And so we have Deacon Doug Flynn, who is going to be presenting on that element, and he's got a few more things up his sleeve as well. And then Mrs. Jamie Crane from our Diocesan Office of Development to talk about a great way to continue to help support the mission of the church even after, with various plan-giving opportunities. So I'm grateful for their presence here tonight and then again this weekend. But again, I'm especially grateful for you all being here to kind of consider these that most of us might, at first thought, think, okay, why is this how I want to spend my Thursday night? But it really is a good, responsible thing for you to be considering. So again, thank you for being here for that. Who is up first? Deacon Doug Flynn. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me all right? Oh, this is great. Well, it's a delight and a pleasure for me to be here with you and hopefully give you a little helpful information, and then we'll certainly have time to answer any questions. My portion of the presentation should take just 15 or 20 minutes. And so I would encourage you, if you have questions at any point, just raise your hand and we'll get them answered. And then there'll be some time, like I said, at the end to ask questions. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm the General Counsel and Chief of Staff for the diocese as my day job. I'm a deacon also assigned up to St. Peter's and Monument. And I serve on more boards than I care to imagine as far as hospitals and hospices around the state. So that's a little bit about my background. So this is just a little overview of what we're going to talk about this evening. And advanced medical directives are basically a large umbrella statement that's going to cover all of these things. Patient autonomy is sort of the underlying principle that's going to start us off. And then we'll go through medical powers of attorney, living wills, CPR directives, proxy decision makers, and medical orders for scope of treatment or most. There's so much in here, but I do want to give you one simple piece of advice. I'm not your attorneys personally, but I'm of the opinion, after having for many, many years dealt with all of these different documents, that the one you really only need, and it's provided for you, form is the medical durable power of attorney. I think all the others can be done with a medical durable power of attorney, but we'll go through and you'll see just some of the differences. So patient autonomy is basically the idea that you as the patient have a right to make medical treatment decisions for yourself. And it's also the right that you have the right to establish in advance what type of treatment you want or don't want in the event that you're in an accident, say you're in a coma, or for whatever reason you can't make medical treatment decisions for yourself. So starting with the medical power of attorney. In the olden days, powers of attorney automatically became null and void if you became unconscious or incapacitated or in a coma. And so that's why it's called a durable power of attorney. The durable part means that it survives even if you no longer can make decisions for yourself, and that's what it's supposed to do. The other thing is you need to understand that as long as you can make treatment decisions for yourself, regardless of whether you've done any of these things, you always have the right to change your mind. And so people say, well, do I have to have my power of attorney? If I give a power of attorney to a spouse or a child or a neighbor, do they have to be there with me when I go to the doctor? And the answer is, no, they only need to be there if you can't answer for yourself. So it circles back to that patient autonomy piece. But basically, this is what you're going to have. It's not going to have any force or effect unless or until you are in that position where you can't make medical treatment decisions for yourself. That's where sometimes they call these springing powers of attorney, because you're not really giving up any rights as long as you can make the decision for yourself. How many people have heard of a living will? This was one of the first types of advanced medical directives, and the tricky part is every state is a little bit different, and so you have to know what your state law is in order to know whether a living will is helpful or not. And as I go through all the things that are requirements to have a living will, I think you'll see why medical power of attorney is more flexible and more powerful. So the first thing is the living will requires you to have a terminal condition. That means two doctors have independently said that you have a situation in your life where you're not expected to live more than 6 months. It's the same sort of finding they would make to make you eligible for hospice. The problem is there's a lot of situations where people will not have a terminal diagnosis, but they'll still need somebody to make a decision for them. For example, and you may have friends or family members who've gone through this, people who have dementia or Alzheimer's or some other mental disorders. Some days they have good days and they can make those decisions for themselves, and some days they clearly can't. Well, they may not have a terminal diagnosis, in which case a living will does them absolutely no good. It requires 2 witnesses when a medical durable power of attorney does not. And then the second to last one is the patient has to be unconscious, comatose, or unable to make decisions for 7 consecutive days. Again, there's lots of those situations with the dementia, they may never go 7 consecutive days. They may have a good day and then 6 bad days, and then a good day and 5 bad days. And so the living will never come into effect, whereas a medical durable power of attorney would come into effect any of those days that the doctor said they couldn't make the decisions for themselves. The CPR directive, how many of you have heard of a do not resuscitate order or a DNR? That's what a doctor will say with the patient's or the family's advice in a hospital setting. So if you're an inpatient in a hospital, you'd have a DNR, a do not resuscitate order in your records. This is sort of like, think about a DNR if you're not in the hospital. So a lot of people who do this are people who've had 1 or more heart attacks or heart issues and have been resuscitated, because it's a very painful process. You almost always have broken ribs, and a lot of times people are like, if I have another heart attack, please don't resuscitate me. Just let me go by the grace of God. Find me a priest. But it's it's sort of like a DNR, but outside of the hospital. As a aside, what I tell people is, if you want the medical professionals to do everything in their power to keep you alive no matter what, don't do any of this, okay? Because that's the standard of care, and that's what they'll do unless you take these affirmative steps to say, no, these are my wishes. I don't want to be resuscitated, or I don't want to have CPR performed on me. This is one of the best laws, I think, in the healthcare area that Colorado has enacted, and it's called a proxy decision maker. So basically, it's not really an advanced medical directive, but it's a process that the hospital and the doctors can follow if you don't have an advanced medical directive. And basically what it requires is the doctor or his designee, usually a nurse or a social worker, to try and identify who the interested parties are. And interested parties are obviously family members. It could be adult children, it could be a brother or sister, but it doesn't have to be. It could also be a next door neighbor. The point is to get everybody who is most likely to know what your wishes are. Circling back around to the autonomy piece, the goal of all of these is to try and figure out what your wishes are, and then have the proxy decision maker or the power of attorney holder or the doctor act in compliance with those wishes. And it's only if nobody knows what your wishes are, then the standard falls to, well, I have to do what's in your best interest legally. So once you get all those people together in a phone, or I guess on a Zoom call now, they should try to reach consensus as to who should make the medical treatment decisions. And it's only if they can't that sometimes the hospital or the doctor would say, okay, well, we're going to have to go to a probate judge and have the judge decide who should be making these decisions. The situation I ran into over and over and over again was you'll have an adult, elderly, something will happen, and they're living with one of the children. And so they've given a power of attorney to the children, or to the child they're living with, and it's always, for some reason, the long-lost son from California who flies in and says, that's not what mom would want, and then causes this complication. So that's an area where if she hadn't given the daughter she lived with a power of attorney, this proxy decision maker might help. The final one I'm going to talk about, and then we'll open it for questions, is the most recent, and it's a medical order for scope of treatment. It's based off a law that started in Oregon, and if it comes to healthcare, if anything came out of Oregon, that should be a big red flag for you, that we probably don't want to follow that. But what it does, and the idea was good, the concept was good. A group of people said, listen, we have people with living wills, we have people with powers of attorney, but nobody's listening to them, whether they're in a nursing home or an emergency room. They're not listening to what the power of attorney says. So let's do this one-page document, we'll make it a bright color, and it'll just be a cookie cutter, it'll just check the box. Well, if I can tell you one thing, these healthcare decisions at the end of life are anything but convenient for check-the-box report. So to have a document or a piece of paper that says, give me all the care you can, give me some care, or give me no care, it really just is not helpful. And it further, my point when we testified against this when it came up was adding another piece of paper is not going to solve the problem of having too many pieces of paper. So the idea was good. In concept, it's not very conducive for these types of decision-making processes. One of our beloved priests who I visited in the nursing home told me in a panic that the nurses or the doctors had told him that if he didn't do a most for him, that they were going to kick him out. And I say, Father, no, nobody's kicking you out. They can't force you to find any of these forms. So don't be fooled and don't let anybody tell you otherwise. A couple resources, and those are all in your packages. The first one is the ColoradoCatholicConference.org website, and they have a whole section on Catholic teaching, end of life, and they have their version, which is, it's okay, but I think my version's better. The second one is the National Catholic Bioethics Center website. They have a host of resources on there. My only caveat is sometimes they charge for them, and there's so much free information out there, I don't think you really need to. Then the last one is an interesting site called thewayoftheLordJesus.com, and it is the most comprehensive bioethics site I've ever come across. We had a situation, a lot of times when I sat on the ethics committee at Penrose, if I had a tough case or something, sometimes I'd go to the bishop and I'd lay out the facts to him. In this one case, he said, that's a tricky one. Why don't you go ask our theologian, Father Larry Brennan? And I went to Father Larry Brennan, and he said, that's a tricky one. Why don't you call my buddy back in St. Louis, who is an expert in medical ethics? So I called him, and he said, that's a tough one. Have you checked the way of the Lord Jesus? So they have tons of case studies on almost every type of medical situation you could find. And even the ones that aren't applicable, they're fascinating because he just does a fabulous job of laying out step by step by step how you go through to and evaluate these moral dilemmas. And every case is different. I mean, I love half the time when I give the bishop a case, he'd say, no, you can't answer that. You need more facts. You need more information. And it's not just a lawyer's thing that if you change the facts, I'll change my opinion. But in medical ethics, the reason to have a medical durable power of attorney, in my humble opinion, is that it's flexible. You don't have to spell out, in this situation I want this, in that situation I want this, in this situation I want this. One of the things Father was talking about as far as the Catholic hospitals, they talk about ordinary care versus extraordinary care. And ordinary care, typically, if there's no extenuating circumstances, you're morally obligated to try to cooperate and keep yourself alive because life is sacred. But in situations where it's hard, where it could be a detriment, where it could actually do more harm, you do have a right and it becomes optional for the extraordinary care. The problem is things that were extraordinary care 20 years ago are pretty much now ordinary. I mean, a lot of the stuff that you had to have really complex surgery on and really risky surgery on, they now do laparoscopically. And so the flexibility that comes with a medical durable power of attorney like the one I've provided for you, I think is really all you need. And so you can forget all the other stuff I talked about. It was just more for your information. So does anybody have any questions? It's in your packet.
Did you get a packet?
So all the slides are in your packet and a sample, if you will. Now the sample medical durable power of attorney I gave you does have a spot for witnesses. It's not required. But you remember how I told you how the living wills were different in every state? If you were traveling and some state did require signatures or witnesses, that other state, even though they're supposed to respect our laws, might give you trouble. So I gave it to you in a Word format, so if you don't have witnesses or want them, just delete that. I can't remember whether I gave you a notary signature or not, but you don't need a notary and you don't need witnesses. You should have everything you need.
So if I could just say something, I worked in the hospital for 43 years, and I did a lot of critical care nursing. One of the most important things you can do for yourself and for your family is to have a medical durable power of attorney. If you come in for surgery, they ask you that up front. This is the only way you can really protect yourself for your wishes. So it's in your brochure, the Medical Durable Power of Attorney. It's a very easy thing to fill out. You need to give a copy to whoever you name Medical Power of Attorney. You need to give one to your PCP. And they even tell you to keep one in your car in the glove compartment. So this is just a good way of protecting yourself. It is the most important document I think you can have.
Yes, ma'am.
I've heard ads on Catholic radio about, I probably don't need it, about the little law offices. Have you heard of that?
I have not. Is it here in town, in Colorado Springs?
Yes, it's downtown. I haven't been there, but it's on Catholic radio on 1120.
Well, we,
So I thought, well, it must be Catholic.
you know, there are some non-Catholics who think that reaching the Catholic population is, but between Jamie's office and my office, we have lists of attorneys that we've worked with in the past that are independent and they're a Catholic. So if you just want to send one of us an email, oh, they're in the packet as well. See, we came prepared.
Yeah, there's I don't know where the microphone is up here. Oh, there is inside that packet, there's a list of attorneys that our office has worked with. It's your choice, so it's kind of a personal choice on who you want to go with if you want to go. But most of the ones that are listed on there, they are Catholic themselves, as well as members of the Legacy Society. So they are going to kind of have a lot to in common with you. And so you can kind of see where they're parishioners. We've listed that. And feel free to give our office a call if you have any more questions. But yeah, I haven't actually heard of that either, so I'll have to look into it.
Any other questions before I turn over the microphone? And I'll stick around, so if you have questions at the end, you know, you can come up and ask. Sometimes people have very personal questions that they want to ask in situations you're not comfortable necessarily sharing it with everyone. So I'll stick around if anybody has those types of questions. Or another one. Okay.
So I have just one son, and what influence can I have today on what his plans are for when he passes away?
Well, going back to patient autonomy, I mean, I don't know what his situation is or what his health needs might be, but I would encourage you, just like she said, that we need to, one, it's a gift that you give to your family, telling them what you would like. And in addition to giving them the power of attorney, you need to tell them that you're nominating them to be your agent or your power of attorney so they know. Because sometimes, I mean, my wife and I had this discussion, you know, she said, I don't know that I want to be your power of attorney because if something happens to you, God forbid, I may be so distraught. Why don't you make your aunt, who's the cardiologist, make her the power of attorney holder? So it's something to think about, and it's just important to talk. I would encourage you to communicate with him. These are my wishes, and sort of leading by examples. And what are your wishes? So, yes, ma'am. That's an excellent point. Two things on that. One, I encourage you to name one person as the primary, and then the form I gave you says if that primary person can't or chooses not to act in this capacity, then I have a backup person. Some people do list a third person. That's fine to do that. I usually find that two, as long as they're not living in the same household, probably are sufficient. In the far, far back, she may need the microphone. Well, I think I heard the question was, is the medical durable power of attorney recognized in California? Well, it's not very easily challenged. I mean, if somebody believed that somebody forged your signature, or, for example, say you had two that were dated on the same date but appointed different people, that might be something that you would have to take to court to figure out which one was the real one. But it would be the same as any legal document. It's not very easy to challenge it. In fact, most hospitals prefer the medical durable power of attorney because it's so simple and because it doesn't require witnesses. And again, circling back to the point of talking to the person who you're going to give this to so that they know and you're comfortable if they know what your wishes are. That's critically important. You know, I don't, because it's not required. The reason I put it in there in that format was that if, for example, you were going to move to California and you didn't want to have to redo all these documents when you got to California, which California does require, I think, notary and 2 witnesses. But for here in Colorado, if you're staying here and you're not doing traveling, I think the form itself is just fine by itself without witnesses or notary.
And please remember, if you go to the hospital, you do not have a medical power of attorney. The doctors have the right to make your decisions. Your family members do not have that right unless they have that medical power of attorney. So the family is helpless, you are helpless, and as Deacon Doug said, the hospitals do not always follow your Catholic beliefs, which is very important.
And that's why you'll notice I folded in a Catholic statement of faith and what you would want as a Catholic from a sacramental standpoint as well as not just a medical treatment standpoint. All right, thanks. Like I said, I'll stick around.
All right, good evening. Thank you for the introduction earlier. Again, my name is Jamie Crane. I am the Director of Development and Plan Giving at the diocese. So basically anything fundraising related, that's my department. But one of my favorite parts is this plan giving area and helping people with their legacy. So basically we all want to live a legacy, right? Correct? You want to live or leave a legacy. Well, your legacy should provide for your families and your loved ones, but it should also provide for your parish and the ministries that mean so much for you right now. Your legacy is shown in your actions. It's shown through your values and how you live your day-to-day life. This is all part of your Catholic legacy. So how you live your life now and how you die. And I know death is not our favorite thing to talk about, but the reality is we all are going to die, and the only time that we can make a decision on the things that we're leaving behind, because we can't take anything with us, is right now. Now, when it comes to that, they can go to your family, they can go to charity, and they go to taxes. But a way to get rid of taxes is to give through charity. And that's the point of plan giving. So plan giving is a way to still take care of your family and to give to your parish or the diocese the ministries that you care about. I like to say that it's not about disinheriting your family, it's disinheriting the government from your estate. My mom challenged me on this when I first took my job. She's like, so you want me to take away you out of my estate and give it to the church? I'm like, no. I still want you to remember me, but I don't want you to give so much to the government. So that's what you can think about it this way. So let's break it down. Down here, right in front, you'll see I have the 2 jars, but there's also a picture up here. So in these 2 jars, they're filled with pennies. In the small jar, there's 90 pennies, and in the large jar, there's 910 pennies. Now, these represent the average distribution of wealth for an American. The average American holds 9% of their wealth in cash, that small jar. This is the jar that we are going to for immediate spending, for our day-to-day shopping. For me, it's my kids' soccer tuition, school tuition, all these different things. But this is also where we're giving to charity, where I'm giving to the church. So what do you think the big jar represents? Stuff. Yes. All your stuff. So 91% of the average American's wealth is held in stuff, such as your home equity, retirement plans, stock, life insurance, real estate. A planned gift is a way to give from stuff, from these assets, and it's typically at a later date. So the important thing for us to remember as Christians is if we profess that everything is given to us from God for us to be good stewards of, then why aren't we giving from this 91% and sharing it with the ministries and in the parishes that we love so much? We probably all want to give from that jar, and it might just be we don't know a way to do it or didn't think that it's possible. A good thing to remember too is when you're giving from this area, it won't affect your current lifestyle. It's a really great way of giving. So here in the Diocese of Colorado Springs, we have our Catholic Legacy Society. So this is a special group of people that have made the decision to make their parish, the diocese, their favorite ministry part of their legacy. We have an annual Mass and Luncheon that's with Bishop, and we just get together to honor and thank those members that have made this great pledge of gift, and it's a really good time to get together. Usually the Mass and Luncheon are held around October. Thanks to COVID this year, we at least were able to hold a beautiful Mass. It was last week, and we did live stream it, so that same beautiful Mass was held in honor of those members. I believe Father Jim can talk on it, or maybe Rosemary, but I think you also here at your parish have a beautiful tree over here that will be honoring your legacy members as well. I don't know all the details, but more details to come for your parish as well. So the first and most easiest way for you to do a planned gift, and this would also be to answer your question about how can I help my son, or how can I be a good witness or do a huge gift for your family, is just to have a will. The easiest and best way is a gift in your will, or what is called a bequest. And any gift, large or small, can make such a huge impact on the future of the church here in the diocese, or even on your loved ones. So we all know, and wills sometimes get a little scary, and so I've kind of put up here 3 of the most things that I hear about. So the first one would be, wills are only important if you have a lot of money and a lot of property. This is false, I would say. Wills can do so much more than hand out your money and your property to people. For people such as me, I have minor children. I can declare who's going to take care of my kids if something were to happen to me and my husband. I love my pet. You can take care of your pets. You can make sure they're taken care of. You can leave instructions for your family members for those digital assets, the passwords. It's great ways to write things down so that they're not guessing. And then my biggest one, and like Rosemary chatted about earlier, is your funeral wishes. There's so much more that you can do. And the key, what I would say, is write it down, because you do not want your family to come to that day and make these judgments last minute. I've kind of touching on family, I had this lady at our church. I attend St. Francis up in Castle Rock. This lovely lady, she attended daily Mass, loved her to death, and we knew how passionate she was. She did not, when she passed away, she didn't have her will, she didn't have anything written down, and her only son was not a practicing Catholic. It was up to her friends to push her son to even hold a rosary and a Mass for him, or for her, which I know Rosemary would have wanted this, and it broke our heart to have to fight so hard to do that. That can all be taken care of by you leaving that in your will and your instructions and writing things down. So second myth, it kind of goes along the lines. My family knows what I want. I don't need a will. Just like I said, they might know what you want, or they might think they know what you want, but if you don't have a will, it doesn't matter what they know and what you want. The government is going to decide what happens to you and what happens to all of your stuff. And it takes a long time, and it will never end the way you probably wanted it to. And the last myth I would say is writing a will takes a long, and it's complicated and can be expensive. It can be, but this is false right now. I'm happy to say that we just partnered with a brand new company called FreeWill, that we have an online tool that is for all of you to use, where you can go in. It's less than 20 minutes. Rosemary told me she went in and did it, and it was lovely. You can go in on your own time. It'll walk you through all the areas that you need to do to fill out a will. You get to an area where you can print it, get the signatures you need, and you have it all ready to take to an attorney. It also will flag for you if you do have a complicated estate and you need a little more legal advice or something along those lines. It'll flag and tell you, this is a little more complicated. You might want to talk to an attorney about it. It's a great tool, and in your flyer, or in your packets, you have a flyer that goes to that website, and it's entirely free for you. So I wanted to just share a couple stories of some of our legacy members with you. So the first one would be James Verone. So he worked at Pikeview Coal Mine and Peak Steel. He attended Corpus Christi Elementary School back in the 1920s, and that school remained very, very dear to him throughout his life. What he did is he remembered Corpus Christi School in his will, and upon his death, the school received a gift from his estate, so a bequest gift. At his request, that sum of money was placed into what we have, or what is called an endowment. And today, the earnings in that endowment provide funds for tuition at Corpus Christi for 2 elementary school students each year. So now that we're talking about endowment funds, those are great ways to give perpetual gifts. You can start one that's a memorial one, much like James Verone did and his family members. Or you can also, through the Catholic Foundation here in the diocese, there is already established endowments for every single parish, every school, and Catholic charities. So you can include a bequest that would go to these, and they're perpetually giving every year, making such a huge impact, just like James has done, in that he's sending 2 kids every year since he's passed away to elementary school. And if you think about it, he worked coal mine, he was a welder and a coal miner. It doesn't take a lot of money to make that big impact. So Miss Paula Gillette. Paula cared deeply about her family, her parish, and Catholic education. So what she did is she named St. Dominic Church and Divine Redeemer as beneficiaries on her retirement plan. And thanks to Paula, when she passed away in 2015, her parish and the school received wonderful gifts to continue their work for Christ. Now, retirement accounts are really great ways to give gifts. So retirement accounts are designed to go between spouses easily when they're passed away. But when you leave the funds to any other heir, and they will be taxed, and it could be even taxed to 50% or higher, cutting what you might think was a great gift to your son or daughter in half, or maybe not even in half, even less. So this is called income in respect to deceased, so the IRD. So the government basically never intended for these gifts to be inheritance. It's what we call a bad asset. A good asset would be real estate, life insurance, tangible goods, things like that. But the good thing with these kinds of bad assets is if you name a nonprofit such as Holy Apostles as a beneficiary on your form, then that whole thing is gifted tax-free, making an impactful gift, no taxes, and leaving such a great impact on your parish. The other great thing about these is it doesn't require a lawyer or any type of thing. All you have to do is sign your beneficiary form from your provider, and you can put it on there. Another idea that you could do is you can do it on my form, you can divide it. So you can do like 50% here, 50% there. That's another option. But when you include charity, that's how you can get rid of those taxes and disinherit the government. So while we're talking about retirement accounts, QCDs are great ways of giving current gifts from your retirement accounts. They do require you to be a certain age. Right now it's 70 and a half for you to do a distribution from your IRA. But what they're great because they have some great benefits. First of all, when you do take money out of your IRA, typically it's taken in as income, which is taxable, and then often can put you into a higher tax bracket. So if you are wanting to give a gift, but maybe you don't want to have it taxed or increase your income, you can keep the income that you do have coming from somewhere else and then redirect your IRA gift to the charity by going straight from your IRA to the charity, thus eliminating all the tax from it. It's a great way to give. And then once you reach a certain age, which actually just changed this year to 72, there's that minimum required distributions. So if you don't take a those distributions from your retirement accounts. Once you reach that age, they will fine you and tax you if you aren't doing that. If you really don't need that income and you don't want that to increase your tax bracket, this is how you can get rid of that while making an impactful gift on your parish. They're great options. The information about these as well is through this free will company that we just signed up with, this is an free online tool for you as well. So on that same folder, or on that same flyer, you'll see the site that's for the request giving or for you creating your will. There's also an area for you to give stocks, and there's also an area for these QCD gifts going forward. So I have a quick video. I hope it works. We forgot to test it before, so. Oop, wrong button. I don't hear the sound. It's HD. Sorry.
You know it's bad when I have to try to do something.
Well,
I grew up. There was this girl. I asked. Do-do-do-do. She said yes. Do-do-do-do. Boom. Kids, baptisms, cheers, graduations. Some things didn't change. Still, I have my church. Oh. Then it hit me. Now, when Bishop Sheridan didn't hit me. The realization that through it all, it's always been here.
I should have him narrate all the time.
In the fascinating lives we lead, it is such a wonder. With our own rich legacy, some very insightful things are probably being said in the video. Moving and inspiring.
They're cute pictures, though, too.
Is there any more text?
Yeah, I think.
Ooh, legacy, defined as a concept of handing down security.
So it's our first Mass. So this is kind of showing the Mass from our Legacy Society. These are the beautiful medallions that you receive when you become members. They're blessed for you to take home, just like Bishop's doing. I guess it's a different way. And you get a picture with Bishop. Oh yeah, is it hard to hear me from up here? For me, correct? Yeah. Yeah. I'll just pass over the rest of this. But basically, it just kind of showed the beauty of our diocese and the beauty of the Legacy Society and what an impact that you can have by giving a legacy gift. So what I would really love to welcome you into the Catholic Legacy Society, and I invite you to make your parish Holy Apostles a part of your legacy, just like we talked about. Just a reminder that in your folders, you do have, you have the flyer that can take you to the free online will site. There's also the QCD site, and there's also a stock giving site, all on one flyer. But if you're not quite comfortable to do the online tool, there is a planning guide booklet that's in there that can walk you through all the same things. That way you can do it in the comforts of your own home. And then everything in there you can take to a lawyer and kind of save you time that way. On the back area, but I think Rosemary's packet might be better, but in the back of that planning guide, there's empty pages. That's where it would be a great opportunity to write down your funeral and your wishes to your family. Like I said, it's such a gift for your family to write down your wishes. We used to do this presentation with a funeral home, and they said the countless amount of people who came in when funeral plans weren't written down. You know, the son would come in and, Mom always deserved the best, so I want the $500,000 gold casket. But maybe Grandma did not, or Mom didn't want that. Maybe she was just pretty simple in wanting things. If you take and write all that down, it takes that stress and that emotional burden off of your family. It's a huge gift, and that can be done through your will just the same. It's a beautiful gift to give all around, whether you include your church or not. And then there also within your packet is the enrollment form for the Legacy Society. So once you go ahead and fill out your will, or you are leaving a gift, if you fill out that form and send it into our office, then that's how we'll get you kind of going in inviting you to the Mass. You get little messages from us. It doesn't cost anything. We don't bombard you. It really is just our way of saying thanks and getting together with you every year with Bishop. And then there's also suggested bequest language that is specific for Holy Apostles, so something to help, and then as well as that attorney list. So I can open it up for questions as well before Rosemary talks specifically about funeral planning. Yes, sir. Very good point. You're right. So the benefit in giving in a QCD gift is upfront. So if you are going to give a gift through your IRA, you can't count that as a charity gift later on your taxes. Where the benefit is you won't have to use it in income. That's a very excellent point. So from my office, once we would give those kind of gifts, you would get an acknowledgement letter saying that, thank you for your gift, we did receive it and it came in. But it would not come, you would not find that at your end of your tax statement for you to be able to qualify as a deduction. Thank you, sir. Very good point. Yes, ma'am.
Is there a list of financial advisors that you would recommend so a person could go in and say, if this, if that, etc.?
Yes, I am working on that list. When I came into the office, there wasn't a list, just the attorneys. I do have two gentlemen that I know, both are Catholic and both great financial planners. I could send that list over to you. I'm kind of building that one up, just like we did with the attorney ones. But yes, there are recommendations. So you should have in the folder my business card and ways to contact me. If not, let me know before we leave, and I'll make sure that you can get a hold of me, and I'll send that over to you. Father Jim, maybe he'll answer your question.
It's not so much a question, just a testimony. A few years back, before I arrived, the parishioner left the parish an estate gift of, I think it was $360,000, sizable. But we were able to benefit from that every year, and it goes to support Catholic education at Holy Apostles. It's the Holy Apostles Catholic Education Tuition Assistance Endowment. And so with our own preschool, we scholarship kids going to Catholic schools throughout the diocese, even Catholic colleges. So that's just a great example of how it really has an impact here in our parish. We also have a parish endowment. It's smaller, but it still is something that benefits us every year. So it's a wonderful, wonderful supplement
Yep, and the great thing with endowments through our Catholic Foundation is you can add to those, so they're not closed off. So if that is important to you, either one of the ones that Father Jim had talked about, the whole idea is to grow them and get them bigger, because then they have a bigger amount each year that goes out and comes to the parish or goes to the Catholic Education Fund. So that's where the bequest language kind of comes in, is if you do have that specific thing in mind, you can put, I would love to leave my gift of this percentage or this amount, and I want it to directly to go to Holy Apostles, blah, 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 endowment fund, if that's what you choose. And that way, it's giving every year. You can also give current gifts to endowment funds. They're not closed off for just plan gifts. They're a way to give perpetually, so just to keep those in mind. Yes, ma'am? Yes. So if you already have a will, depending on how old it is, or how closely related it is to what your wishes are, I know, from year to year, especially at my age, I'm going to be needing to change mine quite often because my kids are going to get older and things are going to be changing. So if you have little modifications, that's where addendums are great to add on, and making sure they have the signatures, making sure they have they look legit. We have a state we're helping out with right now that has one addendum that was added 2 days before death, and it's up in arms now because it doesn't look quite right. So just make sure you're following what your will says and how to make an official addendum. But yes, if it's so dated that you need to do a whole bunch of different changes, I would recommend redoing it, and that's where the free will might help you out. And redoing it, and that way you're not going through the big hassle of making a big will. All right, Miss Rosemary. Hold that up there.
Thanks, Jamie. So I'm the funeral coordinator at Holy Apostles, and I've been doing it for about 2.5 years. One of the greatest gifts you can give to your family is to pre-plan your funeral. You can't imagine how families come in, and so many children nowadays are not practicing Catholics. They have no clue about what you might want, and they just sit there dumbfounded, and they'll say to me, "You pick the readings, you pick the songs, you do it all," and I will not do that. I will give them the book and tell them to go home and read through the readings and see which reading touches them. I'll give them the list of the songs and tell them to go play them on YouTube and pick out a song that strikes a chord in them. So by people coming in ahead of time and pre-planning their funeral, everything is done. We go through it all. We listen to all the wishes that people have. We make copies for them to give to all their children so that their children know what their wishes are. Whether they actually do it at the end, we have no control over. But as a Catholic, it is our right to have a funeral mass. And we really encourage all our parishioners to do this. You know, a lot of families will come in and say, well, we'll just have a memorial service. And I'll be slightly aghast and say, but we should have a funeral mass. And so most of the time they do, because, like I said, so many of our children are not practicing Catholics, and they have no clue what goes on in the church anymore or what our desires are. So I have these booklets that I gave you all. You can read through them. But when you come in to pre-plan, we actually go through. You have a book you take home, you look through the readings, you look through the songs, and we write it all down, and then we keep it in the office, and you give it out to your spouses and your kids. And it's just a wonderful gift. I just encourage everybody to think about doing that. I also try to help with the knowledge I've gained through different funeral homes, different cemeteries, what's available at the end of life after somebody dies. A lot of time families do not have the money for a big funeral, but yet families are being pressured to do this and to buy that casket. I'm amazed at, the difference in prices of things. And a lot of times families only have a few $1,000s, and where can that go? So there are so many things in town, so many places in town where you can go and afford it. A funeral does not have to bankrupt a family. So I try to help families with this too. So any questions? So we have different columbariums in town. We have it at St. Mary's. We have one at St. Francis, and we have them at Shrine of Remembrance. They all range in different prices, but like the least expensive one at Shrine of Remembrance is you can get a family niche for 3 members or 3 people for $3,000. That's probably one of the least expensive places in town. Their crypts go up to $25,000. So it depends on how proud you are of yourself. I don't know what you want to give yourself. Evergreen Cemetery has niches if you're going to be cremated. And I think they're about $1,100 if you get the bottom one. As you go up, they get more expensive. So it's really funny to me. Or you can actually, if you already have a family plot and you are cremated, you can be buried in that plot, in that family plot, without having to buy an additional one. But you need to investigate those things. St. Francis, their niches start at, I think it's about $2,500, $2,600 for a niche. For a family, it's about $5,000 for 2 people. Yes, Mary? Yeah. Right, so in... So when somebody comes in to either pre-plan or a family comes in after a loved one has died, one of the first questions I ask are, where will the cremains or body be interned? And being scattered in California, because that's where they came from, we deny them their Catholic Mass. The cremains or the body, it does have to be kept intact. And Father Barron's great way of explaining this to me was, So you wouldn't cut off a person's arms and legs and just throw them off into the hills, you know, and so that's what you're doing with cremains. If you take bits and pieces, and sometimes people want some of the ashes in a locket, or they want to divide them between the children. It really befuddles me what people can come up with, but they have to stay intact, and we have to know where they are going to be interned before we can agree to mass. Any other questions? You can make your appointments by calling the office, and I'll sit down with you and we can pre-plan your funeral. Any questions for anybody? This is just really the tip of everything. You know, you can call any of us and ask us more in-depth questions or email. This is so good, and it's so necessary to do these things. Just protect yourself, protect your family, and protect your spouse. It is so hard if somebody dies for a spouse to come in when they're grieving, to try to plan all these things out. Even the legacy part, you know, wondering why they had no say at the hospital as to how their loved one was going to die. All these areas are so important, and it is the best gift we can give to our families.
If you saw me texting in the pews, I'm not playing Candy Crush. I'm actually working with a family who, a very dear friend of mine, she just passed away yesterday morning, unexpectedly. She is 68 years old, and this is exactly what the family is dealing with right now. So yes, it's always an appropriate time to kind of think about these things. But let's not end on that note. Let's end with a prayer for all of our loved ones, families and friends and parishioners who have passed on, and let's entrust them to the care of Our Lady. Let's pray together. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful evening. Suggested over cocktails, but she said no.
All right. Is it on? I guess I would just add, one more thing I've included in there. When I talked about the plant giving, those are the most basic and the easiest ones to do. There are so many other complicated things out there. There is a brochure in there that goes through some of those other bigger cruts and all these other things. They're not very common, which is why I didn't touch on them. The most common is a will, which is really important, and then gifts of your IRA, your retirement, those types of stuff. So if you are looking at one of those big things, there is some information, and I can point you in the way of an attorney, not even necessarily, or a financial advisor, exactly. So, but yes, looking forward to contacting or talking with you. Thank you again for being here.